The cracks that appeared in recent months resurfaced on Tuesday night as the Caribbean Community CARICOM leaders gathered under a drone-style facility for the ceremonial opening of the 50th regular meeting. Jamaica's Prime Minister Andrew Holness set the ball rolling by reminding his colleagues as well as the international community that the 15-member CARICOM is and has never been claimed to be a political union. As a result, he says, the CARICOM Treaty does not mandate a singular foreign policy or a supernatural authority.
The question before us, therefore, is not whether CARICOM can endure, for we have and we will, but whether it can deliver for our people with urgency and relevance in a rapidly changing world. For decades, an idealized narrative around Caribbean integration, while well-intentioned, has framed perhaps unrealistic expectations within our respective populations. It has also perhaps unintentionally diminished the genuine strengths of our existing arrangement. An association of independent states bound not by uniformity, but by shared purpose, mutual regard, and a deep history of collaboration. CARICOM is not, and has never claimed to be, a political union. Our treaty does not mandate a singular foreign policy or a supranational authority. And because we are sovereign states, each accountable to our own electorates, we will at times assess risks differently, sequence priorities differently, or interpret geopolitical opportunities differently. That is not evidence of the weakness of our association. This is the natural expression of sovereign democracies navigating an increasingly turbulent global environment.
In recent months, the Trinidad and Tobago Prime Minister Kamala Persad-Bissessar has described CARICOM as not being a reliable partner, citing poor management, weak accountability, among other issues. Her address, therefore, to the summit was the most anticipated, particularly given her open public support for the United States and its military action in the region in dealing with the illegal drugs trade.
The military action by the American military in the Caribbean caused, you know what happened in our country? Caused our murder rate to decrease by 42%. You know what that meant? There were 257 less murders in TNT. I can say thanks again to President Trump. And thanks again to Secretary Rubio, Marco Rubio. I thank them and the US military for the cooperation and what they shared with us for national security matters. Maybe in your islands you don't have the kind of crime we have. I know Prime Minister Houseless, we tried to pass the Oswald bill in Trinidad. We were not as fortunate as you in the parliament, but I know you have done well with your murder rate. So some of us, the crime is so bad. I cannot depend on just my military, my protective services, and certainly from you in the CARICOM, many of you do not have military or large police services to help us down there. So again, I repeat, you know, in Trinidad there's a saying, who vexed lost? But we gained from the help, I'm saying, that military help, and I will welcome them again. So we changed the policy, and we were able to bring those murders down by 42%. As I say, that's 257 less people who would have been dead had we not taken that course of action.
But she widened her comments to deal with the situation in Cuba, where she believes the absence of democracy and not US policies are behind the current situation facing the Cuban population.
Let me remind me and us, every single leader in this room was elected by a free and fair democratic election. Everyone in our countries. And so I ask, why do some CARICOM governments and political parties believe that they and their parties and their supporters should have the right to contest democratic elections to choose them as leaders, where the Cuban citizens have no right to a free and fair election? And whilst I talk with you, Prime Minister Holness, I empathize with the people, the good people of Cuba, but there's a regime that's a dictatorial one, and none of us want that in our country, not one of us. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here today. We were all elected by free and fair elections. And so we cannot advocate for others to live under communism and dictatorship, but we want to live here in our CARICOM region under democracy and capitalism. That's an oxymoron, it's a contradiction. For ourselves, we want free democracy, but tell the Cuban people, okay, we feel sorry for you. It can't work. And as you said, Prime Minister Holness, we have to find a mechanism for the humanitarian efforts of the people of Cuba, but at the same time, we cannot, and I will not, Trinidad and Tobago will not support a dictatorship in Cuba or anywhere else.
Among the guests attending the ceremonial opening of the CARICOM Summit on Tuesday night was the Trinidad-based Caribbean political analyst Derek Ramsamudge. And I asked him to put into context the statements made by both Prime Minister Holness and Prime Minister Prasad Bisesa.
I think we have witnessed a conversation that shows the contradictions amongst the CARICOM leaders. Clearly, their position of being independent sovereign states above and beyond any sort of U.S. influence is what is certainly being questioned today. We did have some commonalities when it comes to the environment, climate finance, invested in human capital. So there were some common themes. However, it is clearly evident the U.S. is influencing the position. We saw a lot of political spin by certain prime ministers trying to justify a position. I suspect there are many detailed conversations behind closed doors. And I think the Caribbean will be tested in the next 48 hours as we expect the U.S. influencers to arrive.
And do you expect, coming out of that meeting with Marco Rubio on Wednesday, do you expect the Caribbean to be much more fragmented?
The question is not fragmented, and that's what was put forward. The question is whether they can maintain their sovereignty as individual states and have any sort of CARICOM consensus. That is what is at risk. Whether or not you can have CARICOM consensus, you're talking about Cuba, but you have failed in Haiti. You have failed to basically deal with the poverty, deal with the governance in Haiti, who is a full member of CARICOM. And the migration issue next to Jamaica from Haiti is also a real and present danger. So there's a level of mixed messages expressing concern over Cuba and wanting to deal with those matters, but abdicating a sense of a solution. Yes, you can say that solutions were tried and they have not succeeded, but that does not mean you cannot restructure how you deal with the CARICOM matter.
But even as he made clear he was not getting involved in the politics, the CARICOM chair and Prime Minister of St. Kitts and Nevis, Dr. Terence Drew, urged his fellow leaders to come to the aid of Cuba.
Cuba's population is anywhere from 9 to 12 million people. Excluding Haiti, the rest of CARICOM does not amount to 10 million people. Therefore, if a state within our community is so destabilized, it will affect all of us in the region. And as a matter of course, it is important that the community looks at the humanitarian issue in Cuba, treats it extremely seriously, and the community must serve as a conduit to ensure that there is communication and dialogue between the forces that be, so that the best opportunity can be had. And so I ask the community that even though the situation might be daunting, we have a collective effort to make to stabilize our region. I must give full disclosure. I studied in Cuba. I lived in Cuba for 7 years. I have friends there. I have people who are like family to me. They reach out to me and tell me of their difficulties. Food has become terribly scarce for some. Access to water has been challenging. Garbage fill the streets. Houses without electricity. I can only feel the pain of those who treated me so well when I was a student. I can feel their challenges and their difficulties. I do not get involved in their politics, but as a matter of humanity, it is challenging. I will say it is almost impossible not to feel the pain the pain that is conveyed to me in messages and calls from.
The U.S. Secretary of State is expected to hold a bilateral meeting with Prime Minister Persaud Bissessar after meeting collectively with the other regional leaders during his 2-hour visit.